I was working at a train station in Stockholm when an American man came up to the information desk, absolutely convinced he was being scammed. He showed me his ticket and said the price was way too cheap. I told him that was the correct price for a 2-hour train ride. He said no way, because in America, that same journey would cost at least $200. I explained that public transportation in Sweden is heavily subsidized and efficient. He looked at me with genuine suspicion and said, "What's the catch? Are you going to charge me later? Is this one of those free trial things where you auto-bill my credit card?" I promised him there was no catch. He bought the ticket but stood at the platform looking paranoid the entire time, like he was waiting for someone to jump out and demand more money. When the train arrived exactly on time, he looked even more suspicious. He got on but kept muttering that something was definitely wrong and he was going to dispute the charge when he got home. My sister taught English in Japan for a year, and she had an American co-worker who became obsessed with the idea that Japanese people were secretly judging him. Not in a normal self-conscious way, but in a full conspiracy theory way. He was convinced that every time someone bowed to him, they were actually bowing lower than they were supposed to as a subtle insult. He started measuring bow angles. He brought a protractor to work. He would stand in the hallway and clock how many degrees people bowed at and then compare it to how they bowed to Japanese staff. He created a spreadsheet. My sister tried to tell him that he was losing his mind and that people were just being polite. He said, "That's exactly what they want you to think. The politeness is a cover. They're running psychological experiments on foreigners." He eventually convinced himself that the entire school was in on it and quit after 3 months. He moved back to Ohio and told everyone that Japan was too passive-aggressive for him to handle. An American family sat next to me at a restaurant in Barcelona, and I got to watch them have a full crisis over the meal schedule. They arrived at 6 in the evening, and the restaurant told them the kitchen didn't open until 8:30. The father could not process this information. He said, "What do you mean the kitchen isn't open? The restaurant is open. I can see people sitting here." The waiter explained that Spaniards eat dinner late and the kitchen opens at 8:30. The mother said, "That's not dinner time, that's bedtime. What are we supposed to do for 2.5 hours?" The waiter suggested they have some tapas and drinks at a bar. The father said, "We don't want drinks, we want dinner. This is insane. How does anyone in this country have a normal work schedule if they're eating dinner at 9 p.m? The teenage daughter said, "Maybe their work schedule is different too." The father ignored her and asked the waiter if there was an American section of Barcelona where restaurants followed normal hours. The waiter said no. They left to find a McDonald's. I saw them walk past the window 20 minutes later, still looking for it. I was on a bus in rural Scotland, and an American tourist asked the driver to turn on the heat. It was the middle of July. The driver said it was 18 degrees outside, which is perfectly comfortable. The American said, "18 degrees? Are you kidding me? That's freezing. I'm literally shivering." The driver realised the problem and said, 18 Celsius, mate. That's about 64 Fahrenheit. The American looked relieved for a second and then got angry again. He said, "Why would you say 18 degrees and not specify Celsius? That's so confusing." A Scottish woman sitting behind him said, "We're in Scotland. We use Celsius. You're the one who needs to specify Fahrenheit." He turned around and said, "Celsius doesn't make sense. Water freezes at 32 degrees. Everyone knows that." She said, "Water freezes at 0 degrees Celsius. That's literally the whole point of Celsius." He shook his head and said, "That's too easy. There's no nuance." The entire bus started laughing. He spent the rest of the ride Googling whether Scotland was legally allowed to use Celsius. My cousin works at a fancy restaurant in Copenhagen, and an American couple came in for dinner. They ordered wine, appetizers, and entrees. Everything was great until the bill came. The husband looked at it and said, "You forgot to add the tip." My cousin explained that service was included, and tipping wasn't expected in Denmark. The wife said, "That's ridiculous. How do servers make money?" My cousin explained that they're paid a living wage. The husband said, "But what if the service is bad? You're telling me I have no leverage?" My cousin said, If the service was bad, they could complain to management. The husband said, "That's so impersonal. In America, the tip is how you communicate quality." My cousin just smiled and said the bill was final. The husband sat there for a solid 5 minutes trying to figure out how to add a tip anyway. He eventually left cash on the table. My cousin tried to return it. The husband refused to take it back and said, "I'm not going to let Denmark turn me into a cheapskate." They left feeling like they had won some kind of moral victory. An American study abroad student in my economics class in Amsterdam gave a presentation on why the Netherlands would be richer if everyone worked longer hours, like Americans do. He had charts and graphs showing how much productivity was being lost because Dutch people value work-life balance. The professor asked him if he had considered quality of life metrics. The student said, "Quality of life doesn't pay the bills." A Dutch student raised a hand and said, "We have universal healthcare, affordable education, and 5 weeks of vacation. Our bills are fine," the American said. "Yeah, but that's all government funded. You're basically living off handouts." The entire class groaned. Another student pointed out that they pay taxes for those services and that it's not a handout if you're contributing to the system. The American said, "Taxes are theft, though." The professor ended the debate there. The American could not understand why he got a failing grade on the presentation. He genuinely thought he had made a compelling argument. I was at a pharmacy in Germany trying to buy cold medicine when an American woman in front of me started arguing with the pharmacist. She wanted to buy a giant bottle of ibuprofen, the kind with 500 pills. The pharmacist told her they don't sell bottles that large and offered her a box of 20. She was outraged. She said, "20? What am I supposed to do with 20 pills? That'll last me like a week." The pharmacist looked concerned and asked how often she was taking ibuprofen. She said, "I don't know, whenever I have a headache, like 3 or 4 times a day." The pharmacist very gently told her that was way too much and she should see a doctor. The woman said, "I don't need a doctor, I need ibuprofen. This is why America has better healthcare. We don't have to beg for medicine." The pharmacist tried to explain that limiting pack sizes prevents overuse and accidental overdoses. The woman said, "That's called freedom of choice, and apparently Germany doesn't believe in it." She bought the box of 20 while muttering about how oppressive Europe was. I wondered how her liver was doing. My friend is a tour guide in Rome, and he told me about an American man who got genuinely angry at the Colosseum because it was in ruins. Not like disappointed, but actually mad. He kept saying, "Why didn't they fix it? This is supposed to be a world-class tourist attraction." My friend explained that the Colosseum is nearly 2,000 years old and is preserved as a historical ruin. The man said, "Yeah, but they could at least rebuild the missing parts. Look at this. Half the walls are gone. In America, we wouldn't let a stadium get this run down," my friend said. "It's not run down, it's ancient," the man replied. "That's just an excuse for bad maintenance." He then suggested that Italy should look into getting corporate sponsorship to fund the full renovation. He said, "Imagine how much better this would look with a roof and some skyboxes. You could host concerts here." My friend told him they actually do host concerts there sometimes. The man said, "See, they're halfway there. They just need to commit to the renovation." He left a review saying the Colosseum was overrated and poorly maintained. I was in a grocery store in Norway and watched an American couple have a breakdown in the dairy aisle. They were looking for milk and couldn't understand why it wasn't refrigerated. The husband picked up a carton from the shelf and said, "This milk is warm. It's gonna make us sick." His wife agreed and said they should report this to health inspectors. A Norwegian shopper overheard and explained that it was UHT milk, which doesn't need refrigeration until it's opened. The husband said, "That's not real milk then. Real milk has to be refrigerated." The Norwegian said it was real milk, just treated differently. The wife said, "In America, we don't ultra-heat treat our milk because we care about nutrients." The Norwegian pointed out that UHT milk retains most nutrients and reduces food waste. The husband said, "It's still weird. Why would you invent shelf-stable milk when refrigerators exist?" The Norwegian just walked away. The couple left the store without buying milk, and I heard the wife say, "We'll just drink water until we get back to civilization." An American guy in my hostel in Thailand spent 3 days complaining that everyone in Bangkok spoke Thai to each other. Not to him, just in general conversations around him. He said it made him feel excluded. His roommate, who was Australian, said, "Mate, you're in Thailand. What do you expect them to speak?" The American said, "I mean, English is the universal language. It's just polite to use it when there are tourists around." The Australian laughed and said, "So 1 billion people in Thailand should switch languages on the off chance an American is nearby?" The American said, "I'm not saying all the time, just in public spaces." We all stared at him. He doubled down. He said, "Look, I'm not being entitled. I'm just saying it would make travel easier for everyone if we all agreed on one language." Someone asked him if he spoke any Thai. He said, "Why would I? I'm only here for a week." The irony was completely lost on him. My brother visited me in Brussels and we went to a chocolate shop. The woman behind the counter offered him a free sample. He ate it and immediately asked how much sugar was in it. She said she didn't know the exact amount, but it was dark chocolate, so relatively low. He said, "In America, you have to list all nutritional information or it's illegal." She told him this was Belgium and they didn't have that requirement for individual chocolates. He said, "That's dangerous. What if someone has diabetes?" She said people with diabetes generally know to ask before eating chocolate. He said, "That's victim blaming. The store should protect customers from themselves." She stopped offering him samples. He told me later that European consumer protection laws were a joke. I reminded him that he literally got free chocolate. He said that wasn't the point. I was at a beach in Portugal and an American family set up their spot right next to me. Within 10 minutes, the mother started complaining that there were no lifeguards. Her husband said, "Maybe they're on break?" She said, "All of them? At the same time? This is a lawsuit waiting to happen." Their teenage son said, "Mum, people swim without lifeguards all the time." She said, "Not in America they don't. This is a safety hazard." A Portuguese man nearby said, "We're all adults. We know how to swim." The mother looked horrified and said, "What if someone drowns?" He shrugged and said, "Then they shouldn't have gone in the water." She spent the rest of the day watching the ocean like she was personally responsible for everyone's safety. Every time someone went deeper than waist height, she would tense up. She finally asked a beach vendor if Portugal had considered hiring lifeguards. He said, "For what?" She gave up and told her family they were leaving because it was too stressful. They packed up and went back to the hotel pool, which had a lifeguard. She said at least someone in this country took safety seriously.